That's right, tonight on Raw, the Battle of the Sexes.
The WWE has a long and complex history of intergender matches. They've not followed the pathway of independent promotions and other top companies in North America by featuring intergender matches anymore. This has especially been the case since 2008 and the introduction of a WWE PG product. But they didn't always have this negative stance towards intergender matches, as during the Attitude Era, it was common practice for the shows to feature intergender wrestling.
She can! Yes! Oh, yeah!
With women such as Chyna regularly facing men on WWE television. It was even common practice to have segments of top wrestlers being beaten up and laying waste to women in order for them to build heat. Whenever WWE decided to do an angle of this nature during the PG era, they are extremely delicate with the subject matter, and it usually is a trained female wrestler taking a move to enhance a storyline. For instance, Becky Lynch taking the End of Days or Nia Jax taking an RKO.
Oh my god! No! KO out of nowhere!
But whilst these matches are no longer featured today, there were some great matches back in time. So here's our list of the top 10 intergender matches in WWE history. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos, and follow us on Facebook for exclusive lists. Number 10. Jazz vs Bubba Ray Dudley. On the April 29, 2002 edition of Raw, WWE ran an angle where women's champion Jazz challenged Bubba Ray Dudley for the Hardcore Championship. The storyline going into the match was that Bubba Ray did not see Jazz as credible competition, and he saw her as another person to put through a table, much like he did with Mae Young.
No, for God's sake, no!
Early in the match, Bubba Ray virtually no-sold everything Jazz threw. This was before she introduced weapons into the match, and Bubba Ray began to sell her as a credible threat. The finish of the match involved Bubba Ray hitting a sidewalk slam on the women's champion before attempting to powerbomb her through a table. However, then Stevie Richards interfered, pinning Bubba Ray following a weapon shot from Jazz. Number 9. Molly Holly vs Crash Holly. Molly Holly was one of the greatest female talents of the Attitude Era and Ruthless Aggression Era. She attained this accolade by being virtually up for anything WWE threw her way. This included Molly pitching the storyline that she would get her head shaved at WrestleMania 20, just so that herself and Victoria could get on the card. One of Molly's biggest storylines early on was the on-screen romance between her and Spike Dudley.
I will never stop fighting for you.
The romance led to issues between Molly and Crash Holly, which would be settled in an intergender match on Raw. Although the match itself was short, it allowed Molly to show off all her trademark moves, including the Hurricane Rana and a standing dropkick. The finish of the match came when Jacqueline interfered, leading to Molly hitting Crash with the Molly Go Round for the 1-2-3. Number 8. Chyna vs Triple H. The first Chyna match on this list comes in the form of a completely forgotten match that not many WWE fans recall. In the summer of '99, plans were put in motion for Chyna to face Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWE title at that year's SummerSlam. They got to this match by booking Chyna vs Triple H in a number 1 contenders match on Raw. Chyna would win the short match following interference by Mankind. The storyline was made overly complicated when Chyna lost her spot in the match to Mankind, but somehow Triple H managed to get involved in the WWE title match anyway. The match with Triple H would start a long string of intergender matches featuring the late great Ninth Wonder of the World. Number 7. Nidia vs Jamie Noble. The feud between Jamie Noble and Nidia started when Nidia was managing Noble during his time as Cruiserweight Champion. However, once Nidia was blinded during a match with Tajiri, it meant that Jamie Noble would begin to lose matches due to Nidia being unable to interfere on his behalf. This eventually led to Nidia turning on Noble and the two facing off in their match at 2004's No Way Out pay-per-view. There was a stipulation added to the match that Noble had to wear a blindfold throughout the match so he didn't have an unfair advantage. Obviously, the villainous Noble removed this during the match and choked out Nidia using a guillotine choke to win the match and thus end the feud. Number 6. Chris Jericho vs Chyna. Chris Jericho's first prominent feud when he signed with the WWE in '99 was a feud with Chyna. The two would have 2 pay-per-view matches in total, one at Survivor Series and one at the Armageddon pay-per-view. Both matches weren't career highlights for either talents, and Jericho has gone on record to say that he didn't enjoy working with the former IC champion. Now, Jericho would reveal on Ric Flair's podcast that
But at the time, she was Hunter's girlfriend. And when I went to talk to Vince first, when he said, do you have any problems working with a woman? I said, well, no. And he said, I don't want you to go easy on her. I don't want you to think of her as a woman. I want you to go in there and work. The next day in Tampa, I show up, and I get called to Vince's office. And I'm thinking, I'm going to get, like, a pat on the back for having this great match with Chyna. And when I went in there, man, he went ballistic on me about how dare I give Chyna a black eye because she's a woman.
Number 5, Umaga vs. Maria. As the ruthless aggression era was coming to an end, WWE began to fizzle out intergender matches. For instance, in the year 2006, only one intergender match was being featured on television. That one and only match was Maria vs. Umaga. Yeah, you heard that right. The match was booked by Coach on Raw to punish Maria for asking inappropriate questions. The match itself was obviously one-sided, and Maria actually took some brutal bumps before John Cena ran in for the save. Maria would actually go on to refer to Umaga as one of her favourite people to work with during her initial WWE run, which shows how much Umaga took care of her during their brief match. Maria would state in a 2012 interview with Wrestling Inc. that I didn't have the craziest matches in the ring, but I certainly got to work with some of the best. I got to work with Ric Flair, I got to work with John Cena when he was just coming into his own, I got to work with Santino when that character was just started, I got to be in the ring with Umaga, Orton, Carlito. It was insane times. Number 4, Mr. McMahon vs. Stephanie McMahon. For the No Mercy pay-per-view in 2003, WWE booked a father vs. daughter I Quit match, the first and only of its kind. The story going into the match was a basic power struggle on the SmackDown brand, with Stephanie playing the babyface and Vince playing the heel. The match was extremely uncomfortable viewing and consisted of Vince laying waste to Stephanie, his own daughter. The finish came when McMahon began to choke his own daughter with a steel pipe before Linda McMahon threw in the towel on behalf of her daughter. During an interview with FS1 in 2019, Stephanie talked about the match and stated, "Oh my goodness, well, I did have to wrestle my father in what may be the first ever father-daughter match 6 days before my actual wedding. So that's an interesting moment. My mom was so mad at my dad. She said, if you give her a black eye, if she gets a black eye before her wedding, I'm gonna kill you. So that was a very interesting moment." Number 3, Jacqueline vs. Chavo Guerrero. One of the most memorable moments in the career of WWE Hall of Famer Jacqueline was the time she defeated Chavo Guerrero for the Cruiserweight title on an episode of SmackDown in 2004. The match and follow-up victory resulted from Chavo issuing an open challenge to anyone in the locker room, and then this was answered by former Women's Champion Jacqueline. Jacqueline would win following a low blow and a small package. The booking decision itself acted as more of a shocking moment for SmackDown rather than anything substantial, as shortly after winning the title, Chavo would win the title back at the forthcoming pay-per-view. Number 2, LITA and TRISH Stratus vs. Chris Jericho and Christian. One of the top storylines in late 2003 was the on-air romance between TRISH Stratus and Chris Jericho. This was part of a babyface turn for Jericho and the breakup of his tag team with fellow Canadian Christian. One of the stepping stones to this babyface turn was a Battle of the Sexes match between Jericho and Christian against Trish and Lita. The match itself would take place at the Armageddon pay-per-view and was the first time in WWE history that they'd booked a match featuring 2 women versus 2 men. The match itself was very short, with Christian getting the win for his team with a roll-up on Trish in around 5 minutes. And number 1, Chyna vs. Jeff Jarrett. The match between Chyna and Jeff Jarrett at the 1999 No Mercy pay-per-view is historic for lots of reasons. One of the reasons was that before the show, Jarrett apparently demanded between $300,000 to $500,000 to wrestle and drop the IC title to Chyna as his contract had run out on the day of the show. This in turn blacklisted Jarrett for several years, and the two parties had a lot of resentment.
Now, as far as the Jeff Jarretts of the world are concerned, gone.
This is until Jarrett was brought back in the Hall of Fame.
Right to this camera first, smile here, beautiful.
But the build-up of the match involved Jarrett hitting Chyna with various household appliances and telling her that her place was in the kitchen and not in the wrestling ring. Obviously, this led to a good housekeeping match at the aforementioned pay-per-view. The match was extremely entertaining, with both of the wrestlers using various household appliances as weapons. The finish came when Jarrett hit Chyna with the Intercontinental title belt, and then referee Theodore Long overturned the ruling because the belt was not considered a household item. As a result, Jarrett performed a figure 4 on Long, but Chyna hit him over the head with a guitar. She then pinned him to win the title. Chyna then became the first woman to ever hold a title. But there you have it, guys, our top 10 intergender matches in WWE history. Let us know in the comments down below of your favourite intergender match. As always, subscribe if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and Facebook for exclusive lists, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.